Hey guys, welcome back to the Citizen Sit Down. We're here with episode 2 and we're looking at our value of excellence today. Hopefully you've been joining us on Sundays because this podcast is diving deeper into what we talk about on Sundays. So if you haven't got a notebook and a pen and you'd like one, then you can order one and we'll pop the link in the description. And if you want to join us in person as well, then you can book a ticket on our website and we'll leave that link in the description too. But hope you enjoy the podcast.
Bree!
How's it going?
I'm good, how are you?
Yeah, I'm good, thank you.
Good to be back.
Yeah, another podcast.
Another day.
Here we are. Well, this week we spoke about excellence.
You spoke about excellence.
Yeah.
It was so good.
Thank you
Come
so
on,
much.
Daniel. Who knew?
I know.
It's big. It's huge.
Yeah. Well, we're going to dive deeper a little bit into speaking about excellence. So I just wanted to know first and foremost, like, why is excellence in our culture?
It's. I just think it's such an important thing. I think it's like a multifaceted. Is that the right word? Anyway, it's multiple meanings. I think firstly, it's helps us change that perception of church. You know, I think Nescafe, rich tea biscuits. You know, it's not what it's about. You know, we want to give our best. We want to have the best coffee in town. You know, we want to do that. But I think it ultimately is a heart thing, like you spoke about. You know, it's about giving our best to God. It's an act of worship. You see that so many times in the Bible through, you know, Solomon and through the building of the temple and just like the intricate detail. It's in the details. It's in going above and beyond, and it is ultimately an act of worship. But also, like you said, you know, it's so much about our character as well, and it's about how we live our lives and about standing out. It's about holiness, you know, standing out and being, you know, I love what you said about either isolation or imitation, but actually let's be influencers. You know, I think so true. Like I think some of us think that, you know, being holy or standing out from the crowd or being excellent is about, you know, oh, I'm not partaking.
Yeah.
Or similarly, they're like, well, I don't want to be the odd one out, so I'm gonna imitate. I'm gonna join in. But actually, excellence is about standing out. And it's about, but you can't stand out unless you're in it. And so it is about influencing, being an influencer wherever you find yourself, whatever situation, whatever environment, whatever friendship group, whether you're, you know, in a sports team or whether you're in a bar or, you know, I think it's so important to be in the crowd, but also to stand out from the crowd. Yeah. It's about holiness. And I think and I love, you know, what you said about Daniel, like that's it. He was noticed for his excellence. He was noticed because he stood out, and he stood out to the king. And I think that's what we're called to do. We're called to stand out to the king, stand out for the king. Yeah. And so I think it is such a heart thing. I think it's an act of worship ultimately. And I think it's the calling on our lives to worship God and to do it with every fiber of our being. So that's why it's in there. But
yeah, funny. It reminds me of something that we say as a team. We say excellence over ease. And I think it can be so easy, like I was saying, you know, just to like join in or like completely remove yourself from the situation. But actually we're not called to do the easy thing, you know. We're called to step out, and you had this word this week about Peter when he steps out of the boat and God calls him to walk out, even like out of fear, but he has to trust in God. And I think that's often what it can look like, that we're like, well, you know, I could just stay away from it completely and just blend in, or I could join in and you know, like do what they're doing, but actually neither of those things are going to bring glory to God. No. So I've got to step out of the boat and trust Jesus and kind of influence in that sense. I love
and I just love the story you used about, is it Jermaine?
Jermaine, yeah.
Jermaine, come on. I just think it's absolutely, and it's so true. It's about, you know, whatever situation you find. I think so often people think, and you also said this, you know, we think about the next step. When I'm there, I can do this. Yeah. But if you're not doing it here, you're not going to do it there.
Yeah.
And also, if you're not doing it here, there's a good chance you won't get there.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I think part of the calling on our lives is to find contentment where we are.
Yeah.
And to just live out our best lives today.
Mm-hmm.
I think I've been reading this book around anxiety, and it's by a guy called Dale Carnegie, and it's called How to Stop Worrying and Start Living. It's the same guy who wrote How to Win Friends and Influence People. And he said one of the keys to worry less is to live in day-tight compartments, because he's like, we're carrying, so many of us are carrying tomorrow's load with today's strength. And it's about living for today, living for this situation. And, you know, today's got enough stuff of its own. And so giving our all to today, giving our all to the situation we find ourselves in now, giving our all to the job we're in now, to the people we're around now. And not constantly focusing on tomorrow, on this next step in our lives, on, you know, so many of us is like, oh, when I'm married, or when I get this relationship sorted, or when I get this job, when I get this promotion, when I get this much money in my bank account, I can do this and this and this. I'll be able to do so much more. And it's like, God's equipped us now for what we're doing now. He's given us what we need now to be who we are now. And so let's be our best selves now. Yeah. Let's live for the moment now. Let's be excellent now. And I think, you know, I'm so, it's something I do all the time. I spend so much time thinking about, you know, when we get to this, you know, I mean, right now, lockdown, when we're out of lockdown, you know, we can do this, we can do so much more, you know, we can gather again. It'll be so much easier to, you know, I do it. I was so much easier to build a church, to have a church after lockdown. But what's stopping us having a church in lockdown? And I mean, God said, I'll build my church. And he's building his church in lockdown. And so I think the call on us is, you know, what does it look like for us now? You know, what does it look like for us right now in this moment? And I think the verse you're referring to, you know, Peter steps out in the storm towards Jesus. Jesus calls him towards him in the storm. He doesn't want you to wait for the storm to pass. He wants you to step out in the storm towards him. And I think that's the key as well. It's you're stepping towards him. It's a step towards God. And ultimately that is excellent. You know, everything God made was good. Yeah. And then, you know, but he made us in his image. And so we're called to do good things, to make things that are good, to create things that are good, to keep stepping out, to keep creating, and I think that's what he's calling us to do, to step towards him in excellence, because God is excellent. God is perfection. Yeah. And I think that a step towards God, even in lockdown, is a step towards excellence. And I think that is that's something we're all called to do, despite our situation, in our situation. Yeah, so I just love what you said about that yesterday, because I think it's just so true. Yeah, I think it's really challenging, particularly in this time, in this season.
Yeah, it's funny. There was something that I was going to say, but I didn't in the end. And it was basically about that Daniel found favor with this nation, not because he sought the favor of the king, but because he sought the favor of God first and foremost. So again, talking about like Peter stepping out the boat and just kind of like trusting God in that situation and seeking his favor above anything else. And I think, what you say is true. I was having this chat with my housemates last night about, or when I'm out of lockdown. And to be honest, I think that's the biggest one at the moment. Like, you know, or when I can see people in person, because Zoom is so hard to be to talk, let alone influence. Do you know what I mean? And so I think I'd just like us to chat a little bit about how do I live excellently in lockdown when I can't see anybody, when I'm working from home, when I don't really have those interactions. Like, what does that look like?
Yeah, it is. I mean, it's hard. I think it really comes to your understanding of what excellent is. Yeah. And it's about, I guess excellence is about, especially in London, it's not about doing the bare minimum. And I think that's such a temptation right now, even with church, I think, oh great, well, as long as we do a Zoom catch up once a week, or as long as we get, our hangout together every other week, that's fine. It'll tire us over till we can finally meet in person, till we can finally do what we want to do. But I think excelling in that is going above and beyond. It's about, it's like if we're trying to excel in terms of how we are connecting over this time, it's like, great. Like, maybe I have my hangout once a fortnight, but then I'm picking up the phone, and then we're going to go for a walk, and then it's about going above and beyond. And I think it's the same with whatever we're doing during lockdown. It's about going above and beyond. And it's also, I think there's that thing as well of like, in a storm, like we're in a storm at the moment, and I think it is so brutal. I think so many of us are doing what we can to survive. If we're honest, we're kind of in survival mode, and we're like, right, I just need to weather the storm. But I do think God is calling us to advance in the storm, and that is the picture for Peter. It's like, step out in the storm. And I think that for us, like how can I be, waiting time, I'm speaking about it in a few weeks, but waiting time isn't wasted time. And giving a little insight into my talk next week. But there's this thing, Rich Wilkerson says it, he says that isolation is incubation. And it's that sense that just because we're in lockdown, that's not it. What if lockdown is an incubation period? And what if we see it as a season where, incubation means steadily growing. It's a time where you're kind of, you're kind of in this season where you're kind of, you're not like doing loads of stuff, but you're kind of, it's a slow and steady growth.
Yeah.
And, what does it look like for us for isolation to actually be incubation? What are we, and for us that looks like, what are we learning right now? What are we reading right now? What are we pressing into right now? Are we taking a step towards Jesus in this storm or not? Are we, what podcasts are you listening to? How are you trying to get better at your craft? How are you trying to become a better friend? How are you trying to become a better disciple? How are you trying to become a better leader? Or a better influencer? How are we investing in ourselves during lockdown? I spend so much of my day my wife she bakes the most incredible brownies, and I spend so much of my day just trying not to eat too many. But it's like, what if, what does it look like? I'm similar. I'm like, when the gyms are open, I can't wait. At the moment I'm mitigating this, this lockdown belly. I'm mitigating it. But when the gym's up, what does it look like for me to, do a good old COVID cut? Was it like for me to get cut during COVID? I don't know. It's definitely not my goal at the moment. But I think these are the kind of questions I think we need to ask ourselves. How can we make it? It's not isolation. It's incubation. It's not waiting time. Isn't wasted time. Yeah. So what are we doing with that time to excel ourselves, to help ourselves get better, so that when we come out of this, we're better than we were when we went into it. And I think, what I am talking about next is that God. There's purpose in our pain. And we're looking at the story of Joseph and some of the stuff there. And so I won't go into it now, but because I won't have anything else to say. But I think there is one of the places that Joseph found purpose was in prison. He was put in prison, but God was with him in prison. Yeah. And actually, while he was in prison, God was preparing him for his next position. And so, right now, it might feel like some of us are in prison. But actually, I think if we let him, God wants to prepare us for our next position. And that position isn't like a CEO necessarily. It's not like Joseph or Daniel to be in king's favor. But it might be, that job you're going back to after lockdown, that office you're going back into. It might be putting you back into a place. It might be being around a certain group of people again. Yeah. It might be going to the gym, a bit, whatever it is. What does it look like for this time to not be wasted time? What does it look like for us to leave lockdown better than when we went into it? what does it look like to make the most of 2020, early 21, and have it as our year of advancing, our year of excelling. So yeah.
Yeah, I love that, and I think something I meant to share actually is that excellence isn't seasonal, and I'm often reminded of that phrase that says, "I need God just as much in my good days as I do on my bad days," and I think excellence, like I was saying this week, is about our worship in the everyday, and I think there can be this really this misconception about worship and how, when the church gathers we sing and that's it.
Yeah.
But actually we worship in how we interact with people, like in the supermarket. We worship in how we father our kids, or in our relationships. We worship in how well we do our jobs as well. And I think that's mainly what excellence is about. So I think in lockdown, what does it look like to live excellently? Well, it looks like worship. It looks like giving God your best, whether that's having a smiley face on Zoom, or people working in supermarkets, people working in the front lines, in travel, in hospitals, whatever, just going out of your way to say thank you. I've made it a thing to, when I leave the supermarket, I always say thank you to the security guard, because you just never know, they're giving their time, they're on this front line, and I think excellence is just about how you interact, your relationships around you, and just how you worship in the everyday.
Yeah, I think God's also faithful in it. He uses it, and people notice it. Yeah. It is unfortunately against the status quo of our time. I think people are so wrapped up in their own stuff, them little things like saying thank you. Yeah. Of being polite. Of your manners, that you're taught as a kid, mind your P's and Q's, I think them little things. I remember I know someone said to me once, I've noticed you don't really swear. I was like, oh yeah, I don't. My mum always taught me that it's if you swear, it just means you've got a very limited vocabulary. And so that's why it wasn't, but it meant that people around, my friends were like, oh yeah, we don't really want to swear, we don't really swear around you because we just noticed you don't really swear. I'm like, oh, okay. And it wasn't for any specific reason, it was because I was just that was what I was taught. It wasn't, I didn't grow up in a Christian household, it wasn't overtly spiritual, it was just I was always taught that it meant you have a limited vocabulary. And so I didn't swear, but my friends had noticed that, and so it's had an impact on them. Yeah. I was a bit like, oh, that's really interesting that you've noticed that about me, and that it's made you want to kind of change something about you. And I think that, it's something I don't even think I was intentionally doing, but I think there are things that maybe we can intentionally do, and other things that God will use, that people will notice. Yeah. Little things about you. And I remember I had a friend as well who, when I'd started going to church, one of my first friends at uni met me, and he was like, oh, I don't want to be weird, Ryan, but there's something about you. I was like, thanks. And we became really good friends, and we used to just play loads of FIFA together, to be honest. We bonded over FIFA. I used to thrash him, but he used to come back for more. And we used to play in my halls of residence, and then after a while, he was like, well, he kept asking me about that thing. I was like, mate, I really don't know. I was like, I'm a Christian. I go to church. And he was like, oh, tell me about that. And then we ended up running Alpha for him in our halls. And then he became a Christian. And now he's training to be a vicar. And it's just this. But once again, I didn't really do anything. I don't think I was necessarily nicer than anyone else, but I do think God is faithful. And that's the heavenly economy. We give God our little, and he multiplies it for his glory, whatever that is, whether that's, it's not just in our finances, it's in our character. We give him these little things we do. And that's what I also think about Lent. We've gone into this season of Lent, and I think these little changes that might seem so insignificant to us, God will multiply and use for his glory. Yeah, and people will notice it, and he will make the right people notice it, and he will use these seeds. He likes to use seeds. He doesn't you know, you don't plant a massive tree. You know, you use little seeds and it grows. And you know, Jesus says the kingdom of heaven's like a mustard seed. It's like the smallest kind of seed, but it grows everywhere. And I think God wants to use us to be sowing seeds, and He wants to grow them. And I think there are even things that we don't even notice. But I think that's why I think, you know, Lent is such a good opportunity as well, because it's a good opportunity for us to make these small, tiny little changes that God can use for His glory. I think once again, these spiritual disciplines that we enter in during Lent, whether it's, you know, I'm just going to go off Instagram for whatever long, or I'm going to do that, you know, God will use it. People will notice it. And ultimately, that's a step towards excellence, isn't it? It's a step towards changing our character for His glory. It's an act of worship. Yeah. And so, yeah.
I heard this thing recently that said, perfection is a destination, but excellence is a journey. And I just love that, because I think, you know, it can be really hard after listening to like what I spoke about with excellence to be like, oh my gosh, there's so much I need to change. Yeah. And I think it is a journey. Like, it's just about making those small shifts, those small changes. Maybe it's like, I don't know, maybe you struggle with gossip and it's like, okay, I'm going to make the decision that if I receive gossip, it ends with me. Like, I'm not going to take it any further. And I can't think of another example, but, you know, it's about making those small insignificant changes. And maybe it's just one change that you make, but in making those shifts, like, you know, it has an impact, and you'll begin to make more shifts. Yeah. And it is that journey. Yeah.
No, it really is. And I think it's that, I think it does sometimes, it seems like a big journey, like, you know, but it's like, what's that saying? Like a journey of 1,000 miles starts with a step. I think I've just paraphrased that. I don't know. So good saying. But I think it is that, and it's just doing these little changes. I think also, you know, we spoke a bit about it last time, but it's also not on you. Yeah. Like, I mean, we're so quick to burden ourselves. It's all on me. I've got to do this thing. And I think part of excellence is saying, hey, God, like we said, I'm going to give you this little thing in my hands. I'm going to give you what I've got. And you do what you want with it. And that, you know, it's what we see it in the, you know, feeding of the 5,000, this little boy's lunch. This little boy was faithful with his lunch, and God multiplied it. Yeah. And fed 5,000 people, and there was leftovers. And, and I think that for us, it's like, yes, we're going to make these little changes, but also it's not up to us what comes out of it. There's no pressure. You know, we're doing these changes ultimately because we want to go closer to God. That's it. Yeah. You know, but God will use it how He wants to use it, how He sees fit. His ways are higher than our ways. We may have expectations, you know, I'm gonna stop eating all these brownies, so I'm hoping I'm gonna get a six-pack. That might be my expectation. Probably won't happen. Doesn't really work like that. But God will use it in His way, you know, and we might not even see that, and that's okay. Yeah. But it's trusting that. I guess it's that thing, isn't it? We're just trying to take a step towards Him in this storm, and that's our way of pursuing excellence. It's a pursuit, and it's not. I think, you know, I used to say all the time. I heard someone say, "Strive for perfection and settle for excellence." But I used to just say it but not think about it. And I think it's a terrible thing to say, because it just means you're constantly failing. You're constantly failing. But actually, no. Let's just strive for Jesus. Let's just strive. Let's just take a step towards Him. Yeah. And let Him do what He wants with it. And our journey of excellence is our journey of just trying to get a bit better. We just want to get a little better at this and a little better at that. We want to be a slightly better friend. I want to be a better son. I want to be a better husband, a better dad. I want to be a better boss. I want to be a better vicar. I want to be a better, I don't know, tennis player. But it's just that. We want to take a step towards getting a little better. And I think, and God will honor that.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. Thanks so much, Ryan. Well, thanks, guys, for tuning in. Don't forget to join us on Sunday mornings on YouTube for our service. If you want to join us in person, then book a ticket, and we'll leave the link for that in the description below. See you next week.